And welcome. I can see people still dialing in. So great to have you here. Welcome. And thank you again for taking the time out of your busy week to be with us. And so this is really, like I said, a session to kind of revisit the learnings from earlier in the week and really start to think about your impact two-pager as, not just a document to create, to tick off, a to-do list, but really to think of it as a toolkit, a reference point for you to return to, a source of language for storytelling, and really a foundation for conversations, and whether they are with funders, partners, board members, or even with your own internal team. So that's what we'll be exploring today. A quick hello from the presenters from our side. So my name is Roisin. I think I've met all of you already on previous sessions. So I won't go into too much detail about my background, but great to have you all online today. Then also joined again by Pilar. I'll let you say hello.
Hello, I think I've met you as well in the first session, and some of you have been in the drop-in yesterday as well. So this webinar that we are doing today is probably one of my favorite areas as well, because it's how you can use it in your digital comms and in all of your channels, which is something that I have been doing for many years as well. So it will be great to share all of that with you.
Thanks, Pilar. And then just a quick recap on the learning journey this week, in case we have anyone who is joining us for the first time. So on Tuesday, we had a session where we kind of talked through how to create an impact two-pager, and we spoke through a recommended structure that we use at Lightful. We also touched on impact storytelling and really kind of how to get you in that impact mindset. Yesterday, we had a really great digital drop-in. So the drop-ins are more informal sessions where you can kind of drop in and out as you wish and ask any questions. You can showcase any work that you've started to do and get some live advice. So we had a really interesting conversation yesterday where we saw some documents from some participants and I kind of had really nice discussions around fundraising and storytelling. So we have another one of those on Friday. Today we have our session now, which we're going to get into in a moment. And then, like I said, Friday is the final opportunity for a drop-in. And then going forward, that's all up to you to kind of take your new Impact two-pager into new conversations and really help kickstart some of your 2026 funding conversations. So looking at today's session then, I kind of already touched on a little bit of what we'll cover, but we'll run through how you can strengthen your case for support. And then we'll really focus on different digital audiences. So the different types of stakeholders that you might engage with this resource. And then also looking at digital pathways. So how can you reach those audiences? Where do they spend time? What digital channels are they active on? And we'll have a breakout activity around that audience piece. And then we'll wrap up by looking at how you can actually take your two-page document and really turn it into digital content. So how can you kind of use parts of your reports and showcase them on social media, maybe use that content for email marketing, even for your website as well. So let's get started then. So how can you strengthen your case for support? How can you strengthen your two-page document? And really, the best question to start with is, what would make someone say yes? If we are just, showcasing our impact, we're talking about what we do, and we're also asking for support on the back of that, whether that support is financial, whether it's partnership, whether it's looking for board members, volunteers, how can you actually make someone say yes? Now, we know that funders, partners, supporters, everyone really is super busy at the moment. So when they're reading documents, if they're, whether it's downloadable documents, emails, even social media content, people right now are absorbing and reading content so quickly, often, skimming, making very early judgments about whether something feels relevant, and particularly whether something feels credible and trustworthy. And again, we see four things that really matter the most when it comes to not just this impact two-pager, but really any type of external messaging or content. And the first is clarity. So is it immediately obvious what problem you are addressing and who it affects? Also, urgency. Does this feel like something that matters right now, not just in general? And that's a really important one, particularly when it comes to fundraising asks. Credibility, this is something we've mentioned quite a lot over the past few days. Can you really show evidence that your work is making a difference? And then, of course, potential. Can the reader or viewer see what becomes possible with the right support? And that's what true effective impact storytelling does. It creates that clarity, it creates a sense of urgency, not in a panicked way, but in a way that motivates people to give or to act in some way. And it helps build trust and credibility in your organization and in your potential and growth. Now, your impact report doesn't necessarily need, an entire separate section for each of these areas, but really these feelings should be felt the whole way through the impact report document. And one thing we spoke through on Tuesday was kind of this 4-part framework to help you do that. So I won't go into this into too much detail now, but just wanted to include this here as a quick reminder of how you can really bring to life those elements of clarity, urgency, credibility, and potential. They actually fit really nicely into the 4-part framework we discussed the other day. So thinking about your mission, what do you stand for? The challenges, the problems that you or your community are facing, your response. So, what's your model? What are your programs and services? And then, of course, your impact. What has changed as a result of your work? So, it's really helpful to bear in mind this framework as you are, creating this impact 2-pager. But really, it's a helpful framework for any sort of messaging through impact storytelling and particularly fundraising messaging as well. So thinking about why would someone say yes to a call to action of supporting your organization? Why would they say yes after reading your impact 2-pager? And another question that feeds into that is the why now? And that's often one area that needs the most strengthening with any sort of impact storytelling. Because many impact reports, they clearly describe a problem, but they don't quite often land why this moment matters now to kind of overcome that problem. And without that, it's quite easy for a reader to feel informed, but not necessarily compelled or inspired. And so a strong now usually connects three elements. So you have usually a real world challenge or a moment of change that's really obvious. You have your organization's specific role and readiness, and then a clear opportunity for action, growth, and impact. And again, this still links back to that 4-part framework. So a real world challenge, your organization's response to that challenge. What is your organization's role in overcoming that challenge, or at least contributing to change? And then a clear opportunity for growth, scaling up, and action. And a helpful test to think about is if someone read your impact report, if they read that 6 months ago, would it feel exactly the same, or does it clearly speak to this moment now? And that's why we often say that you should, update your impact report, make sure it's timely, make sure it's relevant. And really, it should be relevant to the current moment. Particularly now within the nonprofit sector, there is so much going on across the world. And even if we take our sector alone, last year there was huge shifts when it comes to fundraising challenges with the dismantling of US aid. There were funding challenges elsewhere as well. So lots going on that will kind of, impact your work. It will impact how funders behave and how they support you. And even your work grows, changes, develops each quarter, maybe even each month. And hopefully as well, your impact data changes. So that's a really good test, is thinking if someone read this, 6 months from now, would it still feel the same? Does it need updating? Does it really emphasize why we need support now and why this moment matters? And that's really, really powerful for impact storytelling. Now, we often see a few maybe common challenges in impact reports. And so we're just going to look at a few of those and then how you can counteract some of them to help you when you're creating your own content. So one thing we mentioned the other day, I think it was in Tuesday's session, was kind of moving from activities to impact. And we often see that reports are really packed with activity. So saying what an organization has done. And of course, you're doing lots of different things. You're delivering several programs, you're managing different initiatives, you're doing lots and lots, which is great. And donors, supporters want to hear about that. But what's more important are the outcomes. So, kind of switching from the activity based language to outcome focused and impact focused language. So, try to think about that when it comes to your own impact narrative. You also want to kind of make sure that any data you're sharing is presented with some context as well, and also creating that sense of urgency, why this moment matters. You also want to think about stories, linking them to evidence as well. Data without meaning doesn't motivate people. It's informative, it can be educational, but it doesn't move people, it doesn't inspire people. However, when you combine data with a story, or data with a human voice, a human case study, even something as short as just a quote, doesn't even have to be a fully fledged case study within your impact report. We know we're tight on space with the 2 pages, but even combining a data point with a quote from a service user, a partner, that can make that whole piece of content so much more effective. Also, when it comes to framing and the language that you use, even really small shifts in your language. So, thinking about moving from what you do to what changes as a result of your work can make a huge difference to the overall impact of your impact report. And clarity here, it isn't about dumbing things down or oversimplifying. It's about doing a service to your reader, making sure that your content is accessible, making sure that you're enabling your reader to understand your work in a really clear and concise way. Again, I think we spoke about this on Tuesday, but it's really important to make sure that your language is accessible. Quite often, we might assume that individuals outside of our organization are up to date with all the lingo from our sector or from our sphere. If you're working in healthcare, if you're working in environmental justice, gender justice, and it's not to say you're dumbing down your language or your work, but really making it accessible, not using any jargon, not using any acronyms that people can't understand. I'm really thinking about if someone who is totally outside of our work read this document, would they understand what we do, who we are, and the impact we're having? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then that is a really effective impact report that you're starting off with. So those are just a few tips to kind of get started thinking about how can we strengthen your impact reports? How can we really think about why would someone say yes to investing in our organization, whether through financial means, through their time, or through partnership? And how can we make sure that they say yes now? So why does this moment matter? And how can we try and encapsulate that in our messaging within this document? But now I'll hand over to Pilar, who'll talk us through the next few sections. So Pilar, over to you.
Thank you, Roisin. So now that you have, let's imagine that you have your report already, is how you use that report, and that report becomes more of a living tool. What do we mean about that? Because this is going to be what we focus on today, the central idea for today, is that sometimes we think about these reports as finished products that will sit on maybe on a website or on a shelf, and will get printed and kind of get dust. So that's where their potential actually gets lost. Instead, we need to think about these impact reports as something that is really active. So it's a resource that we have that we are going to revisit, that is going to give us a source of language. So all of these things that Roisin was talking about in terms of how we talk, how we build a bridge with those people that perhaps don't know about us, is going to be really useful, and this is going to be the central piece, right? So think about this report as a foundation for all kinds of engagement that will come later. For example, you may have a statistic in your report, and that may become a social post. Or a story might become even like a longer blog post where you expand, or maybe it will be a donor email, for example. So a report is not just a record of what's happening. It's a way for you to kind of launch into action as well. So let's think about this. So this is like the report. Think about it as a starting line, not a finishing line. its value really comes from how much you use it, from the conversations that it's going to spark, the confidence that it gives you in your narrative, in your speech, in how you start like talking to funders as well. And the clarity that really brings to your messaging. So think about it as a tool, really, as a way to include this in your advocacy toolbox. As I said, whether you are pitching to a funder or maybe you're updating your board members or you're trying to inspire your team, this is like your reference point. So if we move on to the next one, you see that this has many uses. And we are talking about 2 pages because this is deliberately short because it's meant to travel. It's meant to be more things than this report. So it can support fundraising conversations, partnership discussion, digital engagement, even internal alignment as well. It can serve as that too. And one of the most powerful aspects actually of this 2 page format is the flexibility, right? Because externally, it can help you with visibility, with engagement. So it can help you with the creation of social media posts, of website pages, maybe updates to your supporters as well. Then it also helps you with your partnerships, with your fundraising. It helps you with writing grants, pitches, proposals, with donor conversations, and kind of saving you time to at the same time that your messaging is consistent. And then internally, as I quickly mentioned, this can really align teams and support the staff when maybe you have new people coming into the organization. So all of this comes from the same content as you see, but just repurposed to fit kind of different objectives, maybe different audiences. It's a way to work in a smarter way, not harder way. So let's talk a little bit more about audiences, because we have kind of mentioned it, but what do we mean by that and how does that relate to our report? I actually want to ask you now, who are actually your intended audiences for your impact report? For whom are you creating this impact report? Tell us in the chat, like what are you thinking when you are creating about this um, what are you think when you are creating these reports? Because this is something we mentioned also in the digital drop-in yesterday. We talked briefly about personas, about audience personas, and having this clarity about who your audience personas are is going to be crucial to then adapting your communication to each of them. And I can see Alisa already saying, okay, when you're writing the impact report, you are thinking about donors and funders. So it may be that you're also, it could be for so many people, right? In terms of your supporters, your corporate, maybe sponsors as well. It can be many different people. So medias, Debbie is mentioning media as well. Jan is mentioning potential donors, members, general audience, exactly. But also Amy is saying board members to have meeting with donors. So I'm creating packets. That's great too. So let's talk a little bit more about personas. And I see Bakes is mentioning staff as well, which is great. Um, so it's how we tailor then the communication to this persona. So once we know who our audience personas are, the next step is really to tailor the communication to each of them. So what this means is that the content that you are creating is providing value to each of them, is speaking to them directly, is solving the problems that they care about, is maybe including stories that they can identify with. And I want to give you a couple of examples. So think about maybe one of your personas is a young professional who volunteers on weekends. So what you may do is share stories on Instagram that actually celebrate volunteer impact instead of maybe writing long blog posts. So as you see, your persona is going to guide your decisions also around your content, maybe the channels that you're using, and the messages that you are picking out of that 2 pager as well. Um, and so imagine another persona maybe that is completely different, is a retired teacher who is a regular donor. For them, it may be better if you send them an email with an emotive story that shows, like, for example, the impact of their donations. So you see how really the data and what that persona cares about is going to kind of dictate and guide your decisions around content and channels. But I want to say, and this is something that we talked about yesterday in the digital dropping as well, that it's important not to make assumptions and to actually look at your data. So take a look at your Google Analytics, at your social media insights, maybe your email data as well, and have a look at who is already following you, which topics or formats get you the most engagement, or even which days and times generate the highest reach. And this data is already gonna help you a lot in terms of your having that content strategy to for that message to travel further. I'm gonna have a look at the chat now because I see yes. So yes, so volunteers, for example, and then Roshin is asking you whether you are working with influencers and ambassadors too, because this is gonna be maybe another type of a stakeholder or audience persona that you want to consider too. So let's see now how we tailor the communications by channel, because a strong persona is going to help you decide not just what to say, but actually where you say it and how you say it. So think about the language that is going to be the most appropriate, that is going to be resonating with them, or think about the images, the visuals that will catch their attention, or maybe even the formats. Sometimes you may have multiple audience personas across different channels, and that's totally fine. Actually, it could be an opportunity. So you can tailor the same core message. Imagine that you have a particular story or you have a particular piece of data that you want to highlight and kind of build a message around that. But you may tailor it differently across different platforms. So that makes the content more effective and actually more diverse as well. Instead of like trying to replicate the content everywhere, that won't be as effective because it's not personalized to the platform or to the audience. And this can work, for example, really well on email, because email is a really great tool for building personalized journeys. So you can think about this audience and you can segment your audience, tailor your messaging, and schedule emails at like really optimal times. Or websites, for example, think about your website. So on your website, this is a place where many different audiences are going to come to. So it's going to be for your partners, for your service users, for your funders, for your corporate sponsors, for your volunteers. So you need to be creating these kind of dedicated sections or pages for each of them. But how do you include these information around your impact from your impact report? You can do it through stories, for example. You can do it through data and kind of embed that content. So you are telling a story that then will allow you to actually make an ask and actually ask for donations. And then I want to also show you some examples. And this is this is actually a sponsor post from the National Trust, which is a non-profit in the UK. And this post in particular is focusing on a specific audience persona, so is focusing on families, and is showcasing how the membership. So this organization works on a membership, which is a monthly donation. And it highlights the difference that members can make to protect nature, beauty, and history, but also the benefits that members have, because this is an organization that cares for historic houses, gardens, areas of land, such as like coastland or woodland as well. And the members actually can visit them for free. So it's that this two-way message here in terms of showcasing, but also showing the benefits. And then I have another couple of examples. I have one from Charity Water, and this is a different channel. So this is an email, and it's really well targeted. So it's targeted to a specific audience and is to donors. So this is to regular donors. Actually, it's to donors of a specific campaign. So it's for this specific campaign they are running. And the email reflects the relationship the reader already has with the nonprofit. So they have this data and they have used it in the email to select the messages and how they talk to this audience. So in this case, they are showing how the money that the reader donated and they have the exact amount is being used. So this is like hyper personalization if you think about it. And the final one that I have is a website and is the Children's Organs Transplant Association. And you see that they have here different audiences. So the menu is a little bit small, but in the menu you have a section for families, another one for volunteers, and another one for professionals. So clearly guiding the different audiences to their own sections. And it's got a bit of info about the organization, the ways to give. So if you just landed on this page and you fit into one of these audience groups, it's really clear where you're gonna go, what kind of information you're gonna get, and they are making it very accessible and useful. So as you can see, having these two things, having your two-pager and then having a really clear idea of your audience personas can guide a lot of your digital content strategy as well. And I see there are some conversations in the chat. So I'll take a look as well in terms of kind of segmenting, tailoring, and creating different landing pages from different audiences. But it seems unlikely. It feels like it can feel like a lot of work sometimes. But really, it's about kind of putting together all of that content that you have for that specific audience, and clearly market in a menu as we are seeing maybe in this example, right? So with that in mind, we are going to move into a little bit of a breakout activity. So we are going to break you into groups and you're going to work on these three things. First of all, you're going to think about one key audience or use case for your report. So it could be a specific audience persona, like the ones that you mentioned before, or a specific use case. How do you want this report to help you? And then think about how will you share it with them, like what channels you're going to be using basically to communicate this message, this report, this data, and how may you tailor it as well. So we're going to set up the groups now. I'm going to open them and you should be able to see the group. If you are not able to join one of these groups, you can stay with Roisin and me here in the main room and basically share your reflections, your thoughts in the chat. So we are going to give you about, Roisin, like 15 minutes to do this.
Yeah, I think we'll say 15 minutes, and then we'll have everyone back in the main room. But like Pilar said, any questions, just give us a shout if you can't join your room.
Welcome back. I can see most of you are coming back now. Great. So, who wants to share to tell us a little bit how that conversation went? And just to remind you, like the audiences or maybe the use case that you want to use in your report, how you're going to share it, maybe what channels you're thinking about, and how you might tailor it as well. So, who wants to get started? Any brave first volunteer from one of the groups?
I'll jump in and say I thought we had a
Great.
lovely discussion in our group. We found some commonalities, even in, both in mission, but even if the missions were different in terms of our needs and our approach, and shared hints with each other. I thought it was very helpful. And I was surprised we started talking about longer range planning and planned giving and educating people on thinking ahead and using planned giving, setting up a donor advised fund, things like that. It surprised me that we went that way, but it was good.
That's amazing. No, that's really good. And it shows you what you can do in this conversation. Brief conversations, really. You had 15 minutes, but that is the power of kind of being with peers and with people that can look at things from different perspectives. So thank you, Randy, for sharing that. What else? What happened in the other groups? Tell us. And if you can share, maybe for those people also that were in the main room, we also have the chat, if you don't want to like unmute yourself.
Well, I can share the thing that the conversation piece that I liked from our breakout a lot, which was hearing about one of the other participants' previous success with a targeted individualized campaign for re-engaging donors.
Mm.
Um, I thought I just kind of been thinking about that, and it was nice, convenient, coincidental that I happened to be in a breakout room with someone who had successfully done that previously. Um, so that was kind of nice to both think about that as an individualized campaign or targeted audience, and then have someone who had previously done that, and gives me some things to think about for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing, Jared. And you can see also like how communications and data is they are very linked together. Because the more we know our audience, the better we can be at communicating with them, personalizing our messages. So, and that kind of is a constant cycle anyway. Like, we need to keep like listening to them and learning from what happens, how they react to our different communications to improve. So glad that that sparks some ideas too. Anyone else that wants to share how it went? Just tell us how it went, what you discovered, something that maybe kept you thinking. Or if not, like, feel free to leave it in the chat. We may have some time later on as well, towards the end of the session. So perhaps, I don't know, Roisin, if you want to keep going with the content that we have, and then at the end, we'll kind of rescue this conversation as well and share some questions too.
Yeah, that sounds great. And yeah, I hope you all found those conversations helpful. So now we'll just take a look at how can we turn your impact into digital content. So hopefully you might have already started working on your 2-page document. Maybe it's something you're going to do after this week. But whenever you do have that prepared, that isn't just something you can, use offline in that format. Like Pilar mentioned earlier, this is content you can showcase and repurpose across lots of different digital channels. And so when you are creating your 2-page document, I'd really encourage you to almost think modular and really think about, what pieces of this can we reuse? What would look good elsewhere? And that's the whole kind of, I guess, the magic of digital content is that it does thrive when it is modular. So that you don't feel pressured to always create new material, but you can use things like impact reports, which are really full of reusable pieces and snippets. So even a headline can become a social media post. Copy within your 2-page report could become a blog or an article, or even a story for an email newsletter. And then even one statistic from your report can be visualized into an infographic, which then can be used on your website, in an email, on social, all over your different digital channels. So the key is to really break down content into small reusable pieces. And each piece then becomes a building block that you can combine and kind of match together in different ways, giving your storytelling momentum without always requiring constant reinvention and new content. And even when it comes to creating your impact 2-pager, you don't even have to start from scratch for that either. You're already an established organization, you already have your vision and mission statement, You've already got impact data. You already know the programs and what you're doing. It's all about taking existing content and packaging it together in a way that works for your audience. But then you can even do that again once your report is complete and kind of repackage everything for your different digital channels. And I've worked with organizations where they've actually used 1-2-page document, and that has provided enough content for a social media campaign that has lasted several weeks, or an email marketing campaign as well. So it's really about how can you reframe this content once you have it created. And we've got a few practical examples here. So one of the impact 2 pages, one of the examples we shared on Tuesday was this one, which I helped an organization create. And they were looking to, again, kind of repurpose some of this content. They had this really great document and they wanted to repurpose it for social media and for email. So we were thinking about how we could do that. And one really quick and easy, simple example is this. So we took the tagline, empowering girls, strengthening communities, shaping the future, and turned it into a graphic for a social media post. So this was used on Instagram and LinkedIn. And all it's done is taken their logo, their brand colors, their tagline, which was already there, and the lovely image that they had used in the report as well. So, and this was all done using Canva, which is a free tool and platform, but you can use any other design tool that maybe you're already using or someone in your team is already using. But then that can be a graphic that we use in this sense. It was on LinkedIn and Instagram, but that could also go on a website. It could go in an email. So that's just one really small way that you can create some social media content. And if we think about all the different kind of building blocks in this first page, we've got the mission statement. We've got a little bit about who they are. We've also got more information about their programs. All of those different modules that we can use and repurpose elsewhere. But let's also think about how else we could create maybe a social media post or an infographic. So here, we're just using that 10 million impact statistic. So that's one of their really impressive statistics, is that they reach 10 million young people through TV, radio, and online channels. And this is something they are super proud of, and it's an amazing, amazing impact statistic. So just that one number, along with a sentence about what it is, has created this infographic, which again, this can be used in a whole variety of ways on different digital channels. It can even be a standalone printed asset itself. And it is kind of reiterating that impact, reaching those 10 million young people. It's got another one of their programmatic images. It says how they reached those individuals through TV, radio, and digital channels. And it also has an extra stat there that they've added in, that this was a 30% increase from 2024. So kind of just giving a bit more context to how impressive this number is, but also signaling that growth. So not only have they reached 10 million people, which is incredible in 2025, but that was an increase in how many people they reached in the year previous. So it really helps build that trust, build that credibility. And all of this is from content that already existed within the document, within the 2-pager. We've just added in some extra imagery, a little bit of design tweaks, again, using Canva. Everything we're showing you today is using Canva. And the reason we've done that is because it is a free platform for nonprofits to use. So that's why we're kind of choosing to use that. It's also a platform I use a lot myself anyway. And I know lots of you online are already using it, as you mentioned it the other day as well. So that's how we can look at social media content. But how can we use the impact reports for potentially email marketing? So this was the second page of their impact report. And it kind of had a client testimonial. They highlighted some programs and then looked at how they want to scale up their impact. So one area on this page was highlighting one of their flagship programs, which was their school-based sexual health and reproductive rights program. And they wanted to turn this into an email with a fundraising ask to raise funds specifically for this program. And you can see here that was really easily done by using the information that already exists. So we've already got a snapshot of what this program is about. And all they've done is turn that into a simple email. And for the sake of this example, this is just using a plain text Gmail email. So very simple. But of course, you could kind of make this super snazzy if you were using some sort of email marketing platform that allows you to integrate brand colors, images. But for this example, you can also keep it very simple. And so here, all we're doing is kind of using the information, the messaging that's already there within their Impact 2-pager, saying what the program is, how impactful this program is, and then also kind of ending it with that clear call to action of a donation ask. And what's really great about this example is that they use a lot of that donor-centric language. So, with your support, we can continue. A donation will help us deliver life-changing sessions. Together, we can help adolescents build confidence. Thank you for standing with us. So you start to kind of see some of that repetition in that donor-centric messaging that really helps help the donor feel involved, motivated, inspired. And again, that is just one, email from one part of the report. But like I said, they could really kind of use this Impact 2-pager to, run a 2-4 week email campaign where every week you're emailing a different story, a different element. That could then also be backed up with a social media campaign as well. So it's really looking at the different ways you can repackage your impact report once you have it ready. I also actually had 2 examples I was going to share from a website. So let me just reshare my screen and pull those up, because I thought I was looking at these and I thought they were really great examples of web content. Now, of course, bearing in mind, I know lots of you are with smaller teams and might not have the capacity to build new web pages, but it's always helpful to kind of see or have something to aspire to if you have the time and capacity. So this is for an organisation called the NSPCC, the National Society for Protection of Children, that's based here in the UK. And it's actually an organisation I used to work for many years ago. But on their website, they have an impact section. And I think ideally, every organisation will have an impact page or section on their website, because we know that's what donors look for, that's what investors look for, all key stakeholders. And this has some really lovely imagery. Their whole branding is really great. Obviously, they are focused on children, so it's quite playful, lots of lovely images of children that they've worked with and supported. But in their impact here, they say, how have we kept children safe in 2024 and 25? And they've got their key impact statistics here. Very simple infographics. They kind of change color as you move across. So visually, it's quite engaging, quite interactive. But really, it's the content that I wanted to show here. They've got their standout statistics. So they've supported over 1.5 million children in 6,000 schools, and worked directly with 1,500 families, made that lots of referrals, and trained nearly 1,500 organizations as well. So lots of impact statistics, but then they can also click through to how our services make a difference. So what does all of that actually mean? And then they follow up with a quote from a child who would have received support through their services. So again, humanizing that data. And that's what we were talking about earlier. It's always so important to link human stories with data to make people feel and to make them, motivated to give and inspired. And then they go on to talk about what we do. So you can kind of click through to find out more. But this one simple web page is really effective because it shows the impact. It then kind of links to a human story to humanize that impact. And then also shows, what other work they're doing as well. So if you want to find out more. So I thought that was quite a nice example. And then there's another one here for Habitat for Humanity. Now, this one is kind of, obviously a lot of work has gone into this one. So this is kind of like the gold star of what you'd look for design-wise. But this is a global organization that work to kind of provide accommodation for families all over. And this is an example of their case for support. So essentially what they've done is kind of translate 2-page structure that we've been working on into a web page. And so it's obviously much more visual. They've got beautiful photos, but they've got their tagline, help families build strength and stability. They've got a little bit of context. So since 1976, they've helped more than 46 million people. This is kind of looking at their impact at scale. More lovely imagery to kind of reflect the problem that they're trying to resolve. So the problem is vast. They go into more detail here about what that problem is. So housing problems. 40% of people around the world will live in inadequate housing by 2030 unless something changes. They've got more statistics that are linked to the US. So lots of kind of context as to what is the challenge they're working to overcome. They've also got a video there to click through as well. And if we keep scrolling, lots more information. Again, it's quite nice. It's very interactive, but I appreciate this obviously has a lot of design effort that's gone into it. Again, explaining how an aging house, how does that impact individual families? How does it impact wider neighborhoods and communities? Kind of going into detail there, explaining a lot about that, how it can be tough for low-income families. And then immediately going from that kind of challenge to looking at the response and the uplifting response from Habitat for Humanity. It's uniquely situated to address the problem. And then kind of goes on to talk about their work, what they do. But it really follows that nice flow because it really had the same structure as the 2-pager that we're suggesting you use, kind of starting out with that mission and vision statement, moving on to the challenge that they're hoping to overcome, and then kind of identifying their different programs, how they're actually overcoming that challenge, what is their response, and then the results. What's the impact? So you get to the end and it's like, what are they actually achieving? And they've got loads of videos about what they're achieving. They've got amazing statistics here in different areas of the United States where they work. Amazing statistics here, actually. And then wrapping up with a really lovely human case study. So this is kind of like the ideal structure. And then also kind of hearing more quotes from volunteers, and it kind of goes on. So this is obviously a very lengthy document page. And so a lot has gone into this, but I thought it was just helpful to kind of show the different ways that you can use your Impact 2-pager, maybe in the more long term, thinking about how does it translate to a web page on its own. But even in a more simple way, uploading it to your website. So there is a way that someone can access it, whether it's just a button where they can click to download it. And maybe you can tease some of the content on a web page or even within a block on your website as well. So just wanted to run through some of those examples. Let me just reshare my other slides quickly. Bear with me 1 second. Great. So hopefully everyone can see my, oh, sorry, they just jumped off. Hopefully everyone can see my slides again now. So yeah, a few examples of the different ways that you can kind of be very specific around those modules and how you can repurpose them for other areas of your work and other channels. And then lastly, thinking about this report as a living tool, like Pilar mentioned earlier, as something that you're going to use and repurpose again and again. So we would encourage you to revisit your report quarterly if you can. So really treating it as a living document, not a one-off task. And this might be a very brief check-in with your team or whoever worked on creating it. Maybe it was you and another colleague, just to make sure that everything is still accurate. If anything has shifted within your organization, if any new insights have emerged, you might have launched a new program, gained a new partnership, or raised significant more income that you want to, celebrate. And these regular reviews, even if they're really quick and brief, can help you catch opportunities to really amplify your impact, the stories, and keep messaging aligned with current priorities. It will also help with what Pilar was talking about earlier, adapting your impact report for different audiences. So ideally, what you should do is create kind of one generic Impact 2-pager, and then you can make copies of that for various stakeholders. So if you are targeting very specific major donors, then the fundraising ask will be quite different if you were targeting lower level givers, or if you were using this report to engage ambassadors or influencers or policymakers, or maybe you're sharing it, I know a few of you have mentioned, with internal staff, board members. So the ask there wouldn't necessarily be to make a donation, but to advocate for your organization. So create your generic version. And then when you have these kind of quarterly check-ins, think about, what other versions of this do we need to create? Who are we trying to engage this quarter? Who are we focusing on? And how can we make sure this resource is adapted to them? And also you want to make sure, as well as adapting it for your audiences, that you adapt it as your work evolves. So as your programs grow, as your initiatives develop or launch, maybe if metrics improve, reflect those changes in your report. So it's current, it's up to date, and even small updates like a new statistic, a fresh quote or story can really make your report feel credible, feel current, and feel new. It also ensures that anyone who accesses this report, whether through social media, through email, through an in-person event or your website, that the report they see matches your reality and not, last year's snapshot of the organization. And that's really, really important for donor engagement and all kind of supporter engagement, really. And lastly, use it as a shared tool. So we've mentioned this a few times today, but really leverage this as a resource and make it accessible to your entire team, your board members, key partners, anyone that is talking about your organization or will be talking about your organization externally. Make sure they have this so that they feel confident and empowered to speak about and advocate for your organization in the best way with the most up-to-date information. You can also encourage colleagues to reference it or use it for presentations, proposals, communications, and also sharing it widely internally keeps your overall narrative consistent as a team. Make sure everyone is aligned on what you're doing, the direction where you're heading, and also that everyone knows your latest impact data. So they can also, shout about it and amplify it as well. And it also creates that common understanding of your impact internally as well as externally. So those are a few quick tips of how you can keep your report relevant and make sure you're kind of keeping it as a living resource that you're kind of constantly using, referring to, and updating. So that now brings us to the end of today's session. But I'll just pause there to see if anyone has any questions. I know Pilar and I have gone through a lot of content today. So if anything wasn't clear, if you have any questions at all, do let us know, or any comments or thoughts. We have a few moments spare, so we're happy to answer any questions. And just also as a reminder, tomorrow we have our final session, which is a digital drop-in. And for anyone who didn't attend yesterday's, they're really informal sessions where it's myself and Pilar, and it's almost like a live kind of Q&A, office hours. You can ask us anything. You can also share your screen. And if you have either an old impact report you'd like us to share and take a look at, we can review and give some advice. Or if you have a new one, or you're working on your draft, it doesn't have to be polished. It can literally be like a few sentences here and there or some ideas scribbled down. We're happy to take a look at that as well. So if you want to kind of, go into a bit more detail on the practical and logistics, then definitely join tomorrow's drop-in.
I like what you just said about targeting your impact report to different audiences. And it just occurred to me that it would be good for Preservation Chicago to make one targeted to the city's aldermen, because we rely on them to vote to make historic buildings landmarks. So creating something specifically for them would be useful.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a great idea, Debbie. And then that's the whole, I guess, the great thing about this document is that the bulk of your messaging will stay the same regardless of your audience, but it's those small tweaks that make a big difference. So once you create the 2 pages, that's the main lift, that's the main work, and then tailoring it afterwards shouldn't take too long, hopefully, for your different audiences. I can see April has asked a question around, can we have the names and organizations of participants who have joined? Unfortunately, due to GDPR, we're not allowed to kind of share that, but people are more than welcome to kind of share their LinkedIn in the chat now or in tomorrow's session. So if you are happy to connect with each other, I definitely recommend kind of share LinkedIn on here, and then you can connect outside of this space. And also there'll be an opportunity to do that in tomorrow's session. And then just before we wrap up, I had a very quick poll to launch just to find out how useful you found today's webinar. If you feel like answering that, that would be very helpful. And then obviously we have done a few sessions this week. So over email, we'll also be sharing a feedback survey. It should only take, honestly, like a handful of moments. It's a very short one. I think it's only 4 or 5 questions. So we'll just share the link to that in the chat. And we will email it again to you as well. But we'd love to get some feedback on how you found this week and the sessions. And we'll be sharing that feedback with Deaf Giving 360, who have made this week possible. And they'll also be in touch with you for future digital capacity building opportunities, given that the full programme couldn't take part. So they'll definitely be in touch with everyone, and it'll be really helpful for them to get kind of a flavour of the feedback from this week so they know how to move forward. So, thank you, Pilar. She's just shared that in the chat, but we'll share it again over email as well. And I can see lots of people sharing links to their LinkedIn, which is great to see. LinkedIn is such a great channel for connecting with other nonprofit professionals and kind of seeing what people are up to and supporting one another, which is what this sector is all about. Pilar and I will also share our LinkedIn on the next email we send you, so you can also connect with us. We'd love to stay in touch and see what you get up to, and also see if we can recognize your impact on your LinkedIn if you're starting to post about it. Great. Well, thank you everyone for answering the poll. I can't see any final questions, so I think we can wrap up there, wrapping up a little bit early today.